Facing a revolt from House Republicans, Paul Ryan agreed late last week to write and introduce legislation which could clear the way for 800,000 people who were brought to the United States as children and registered under President Obama's DACA program to remain here legally. But what does that mean exactly, and where are we on basic human rights for those immigrants who are in detention and awaiting hearings? Here to discuss that with me is Jorge Rivas, senior staff writer at Splinter. Jorge, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
First of all, I just wanted to start out with the fact that we talk about the 800,000 people who are in DACA as dreamers, but actually dreamers, that is to say people who were brought to the United States before they were 18, are actually nearly 4 million people, but 800,000 of them are those that registered. So I wanted you to just talk about that and how we use that interchangeably. And actually, there's a conversation, I understand it, in amongst the Latino and immigrant communities to make sure that we don't actually cleave those two, to make sure that we don't have legislation which says, okay, 800,000 can stay, but 2.4 million have to go who didn't register.
So you mentioned a lot of numbers, but there's 11 million people here. There's 11 million undocumented, an estimated 11 million undocumented immigrants here in the U.S.
Yeah.
And you're right that there's a small percentage of those that were brought here as young people. So they came to the U.S. and entered illegally or overstayed a visa before they turned 16. And a lot of them have finished high school here, and they are often referred to as dreamers. At Splinter, the publication where I work, we do not use that word because we think that it glorifies a very specific and select few group of people. Mm-hmm. They're young people who we often hear who were brought here at no fault of their own. And what happens when you hear that is that it subconsciously places the blame on their parents, who some would argue are the original dreamers because they're the ones who came to the US seeking a life, fleeing violence or all sorts of things. So go ahead.
No, I think that was an important thing that you just sort of spoke about, and how at Splinter you decide to do that differently. I'm wondering what has been the reaction so far amongst the community that you report on to the prospect that there might be new legislation. It's kind of new, so I don't know if you've had a chance to sort of see what the reaction might be, but what are you hearing, if anything, so far?
So I think a lot of people are taking the news that there may be some sort of legislation with a grain of salt. I think a lot of people have lost hope. So issue right now that is holding any legislation back is that progressives and immigrant rights activists are asking for what they're calling a clean dream act. They want a path to legalization for these young people without militarization at the border or without more policing and deportations of their parents or other family members. And so right now we're sort of in this stage where we're waiting to see who budges first.
Right. Well, I mean, that's been the case since the Bush administration decided to use immigration as a way to try to win the midterms, or actually successfully win the midterms back in 2006. It's been this constant stalemate in these choices that people don't want to make. So we'll see whether or not that's able to happen this time. But, you know, it's easy to understand how people have lost hope. One of the things that you've spent a lot of time reporting on, and doing great reporting, and everyone should be following you, is on the terrible abuses that are reported at the border and in detention centers. I'm wondering, there's been a lot of attention on that from U.S. senators down to people at the local level. I'm wondering what's the latest on this particular issue, and has there been any movement in improving conditions?
It depends who you ask. So Immigration and Customs Enforcement, they say that they treat detainees with respect and that they care about their health. But that's not what the detainees I've spoken to say. That's not what immigrant rights advocates say. At this point, more than half of the 40,000 people who are in detention are in private detention centers. And they tend to be in locations where we hear more complaints about healthcare access. We hear more complaints about the quality of food. Many of them have to work in, one of the more controversial issues is that many of them claim they are being forced to work for very low wage or no pay at all. The migrant caravan that was in the news a few weeks ago, some of those members of the caravan are in a private detention center near San Diego, and they claim that they're being forced to work for about 6 to 7 hours a day for about $1.50 a day, if they even get paid.
That's insane. There's no other way to describe that. That is de facto modern day slavery. That's what everyone calls it when it's in private U.S. prisons, and now it's clearly happening in detention centers. But I wanted to thank you for taking the time to talk to us. You're not on a sleepy beat, so the fact that you did when you have so much going on is something that I really appreciate. And again, I do hope that people follow you and follow your work. It's really important in terms of providing insight into what's going on. So thank you for joining us.
Thank you, and congratulations on your first season.
Thank you. Thank you so much. For more information about immigration and how to help, please visit our website, www.thelastsip.org, and click on How to Help.